Welcome everyone to actually the first remote episode of the Legi webinar. So I'm welcoming here today the co-founder and CEO of Frontify, who is joining us from
Hi.
St. Gallen. And yeah, thank you so much for joining, Roger. Really
Thanks for
excited
having me.
about this. And so today what we'll speak about is, first of all, we will learn more about Frontify's story and product, and then also learn about the learnings from Frontify on their journey so far. In a second time, I will then interview Roger about the topic of equity management at Frontify, and also how they use Legi for this purpose. And at the very end, as usual, we will take a couple of questions. So feel free to already type them in the chat. So at the end, we will be able to look at them. Okay, so let's kick this off, Roger. The very first question I would have is, so you are the founder and CEO of Frontify. And could you say a couple of words about yourself, your background, and maybe your main responsibilities as the CEO at Frontify?
Sure. So yeah, I'm actually a developer by heart originally. So I'm a software developer and a designer a little bit. I sometimes I try. Yeah, I moved into the space of entrepreneurship and started a company back in 2013. So this was quite a while ago. And yeah, and then I also had different roles. I mean, I was a head of product for a long time, and then eventually moved back into the CEO role last year. And yeah, now I'm mainly responsible to lead the company into the future. And yeah, that's what I do today.
Great. And could you tell us also a bit about the story of Frontify? So, you know, how it all started, and what you actually do with the company.
Yeah, sure. So in the beginning, we, out of my own personal need, I created a tool to just bring together technical people, creative people, business people, which is not so easy. But with that tool, I kind of started to, try to solve this problem. So it was more like a collaboration tool in the beginning. And then over the course of a few years, we learned a lot about the market and then moved more and more into the branding space. So we learned that brand is an extremely crucial piece of a company, and something that is not really easy to manage, specifically in larger companies, and which led us to build products around, brand guidelines, brand portals, media libraries. So basically everything you need if you want to work with a brand. So whether this is access to the logo and typo, but also more complex things like just imagery or templates. Or if you want to create a social media graphic, you want to be on brand, you want to have text snippets that are on brand, and so on and so on. So we started that journey, and we're quite successful. And nowadays, we grew to 135 people today. We have offices in St. Gallen. We have people in Germany. We have an office in New York, and yeah, serving many big clients and helping them with their branding needs, and yeah, letting them become more consistent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're, like, as you mentioned, you're really one of the most successful companies here in Switzerland, and you have also very large customers, for example, Facebook among others, or also Lufthansa. And I'd be curious to hear, as a startup, as a company, at which point onwards does it make sense to use Frontify?
It depends whether you're, you kind of see the value of your brand already. I think that's probably the kick start of thinking about it. But normally our ideal clients are a bit bigger. So I would say maybe 100 people up. That's kind of when you really, start to think about, you have a marketing team, and it becomes more complex serving all those channels. So that's kind of our ideal client, because there the needs really start. But it's also useful for smaller companies. So we offer we have flower shops, or, a coffee shop. So even if you're super small, you can start doing proper brand management with Frontify. And I'm a big believer in that, investing in your brand, specifically in a crisis like the current one, is a good idea, because this kind of survives a crisis. It's something that is a long-term investment. It helps you also to understand yourself better. Who you are, what do you stand for, what is the purpose of the company. Creating a proper brand and involving it over time is something that really creates value.
Yeah. And speaking about crisis time, I think this current time is challenging for everyone, but for you at Frontify, you have started the company in 2013, and so it's been a long journey so far. Could you share maybe one of the biggest challenge you faced during the journey and what you learned from it?
Yeah, I think there's countless challenges probably on the way. Um, biggest challenge, I would say it's really about ensuring, keeping your hopefully great culture. In our case, culture has been a crucial piece from the beginning, and we were always afraid, with every growth step, that we destroy slowly certain pieces of the culture. And we really try to invest into the culture all the time and really rethink it. The culture doesn't have to stay the same over time, but it needs to evolve properly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we always, not struggled, but I think it was always a tricky challenge with each step, going from 10 to 30 people, then to more than 70 people, and now to more than 100 people. These are all like critical steps in the process where you have to onboard the people correctly. You need to give them time to change the mindset, to evolve. And that's probably one of the most critical pieces when having a growth story like this one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and actually, this topic is a perfect segue into the next one, and that is so the way I think a company tackles the topic of equity, and especially employee participation plan, is totally part of the culture of the company and very central to it as well, I think. And so the next question I would like to speak about is how do you at Frontify tackle the topic of employee participation plans? And I know that you have a very open mindset and open philosophy around how employee participates to the ownership of Frontify. And the first question I would have is when in terms of at what size of the company, and also why did you first introduce employee participation plans at Frontify?
Yeah, I think it's again, I'm doubling down on how crucial it is to make people part of the story, like properly part of the story, also from an equity perspective. We started really early on. Actually, I had no freaking idea what these option plans are. Whether it's pesos like phantom stock options or employee stock options. But we started really early on, like with the first few people already. Giving everyone a stake, giving phantom stock options to a certain percentage. So we always had a model where we kind of give, I think in our case, it's like 15-20% or so that we give as phantom stock options, and the rest is cash.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a bit of flexibility there. And yeah, we do that actually since the beginning, and we still do it like for every person.
Okay, well, that's interesting. So really all employees of the company can participate in the plan?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's as you might have heard already, I mean, we were kind of evangelizing on a fair salary system, which is consistent on all employees, and this is just part of the system. So it just, there is no, I would even say no negotiation or something. It's just clear, that's what you get. I mean, you have a bit of flexibility to set the bar, but it's basically the same for all employees. It's not, I mean, whether you're a very junior person with a rather low salary or super senior person with a high salary, it doesn't really matter. So
Yeah,
all participate.
mm-hmm. And from what I know, I think you also even gave in the past the possibility to employees to even invest during financing rounds, so in real stock directly. Could you maybe talk a bit about this, also about how the resonance was about this proposal among the employees, and if you would, generally speaking, advise also other companies to offer the possibility to employees?
Yeah, I think for that, I think people have to understand that, when you start as an employee, I mean, obviously you get explained what a PISO is, or what is this program about, but it's something that is not very tangible, right? So it's something that is a future value that you might get when there is an exit, but it's tough to really say, is this a one-to-one value that you get compared to cash or whatever? So for the people, this is not super easy to really relate to it. And actual shares are a bit more flexible in a sense of you can sell them whenever you want if you find a buyer. So it's a bit more flexible in terms of what you can do with them, but also a bit more tricky in terms of all the legal aspects and your duty. But we kind of always said this is a prerequisite when we do a financing round, that all the employees that want can participate, because for some it's extremely important that they have this tangible equity, like a proper share kind of.
Yeah.
Because it gives them even more feeling of ownership. You would say, I mean, in the beginning you might want to explain that's not the case, but in the end, still mentally or from a psychological standpoint, it's still worth slightly more.
Yeah.
It feels. And that's why we wanted to give that opportunity to the people. And actually, when you look at it today, I would say like it's a huge majority of the company is actual shareholder.
Okay.
In addition to phantom stocks. And that's kind of, for me as a founder, it's such a sign of commitment. I mean, when people put in extra money in addition to to what they may not get in terms of cash in the salary, it's like an extremely positive sign if that happens.
Yeah.
And it's like it brings a smile on your face if you see, look, I mean, there has been like, I don't know, 50 people or 60 people like buying into your company, like committing to that journey. That's such a strong sign that I think pesos cannot completely replace that.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's, we totally are on the same line at Legi as well. We see it in the same way. And I think really it is of course a certain admin effort, right, to allow everyone to invest, but the upside afterwards, like having all these owners in the company and this engagement, is really tops up this effort. And also, of course, to bring in Legi here as well. This Legi helps for that case, to really be able to manage this ownership at scale when you have a lot of owners. And also one thing I wanted to speak about here is, you mentioned briefly secondaries. So if, for example, in a later financing round, certain employees typically, or early investor, want to sell a part of their ownership, then what we actually are releasing this month is the possibility that you can actually assemble all the requests of secondary share sale. And then as an admin, you can basically in a centralized way, gather all these requests and then manage the secondary sale. So that's really something.
Yeah, and I think that's great, because I know how much of a manual effort it is today. Actually, I'm looking forward to that feature. Because it's like, yeah, it's quite a bit of work.
Exactly.
Manage that.
Yeah. Now, just for the last couple of minutes, I think what would be really interesting for also our audience is to learn a little bit more concretely how Frontify uses Legi. So if you could simply just showcase, of course, with demo data, just 2 or 3 main things in the app to our users of how you use Legi, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, sure. Let me share my screen, and you can hopefully see my screen.
Yes.
Can you see it? So, to be honest, I'm not the best expert. We have better people nowadays that know all little details of it, but I try to do my best. So basically, what I'm specifically interested in, and what I think is very helpful for our people, is, for example, the equity plans, because with certain standards you have to fulfill. You need to know how much movement you get in the pesos. So we talked about that, and you need to know on which point in time which person had how many pesos. So you need to be able to show that. So in this view, you can select the date, and then you get like the point in time, and kind of the status of each shareholder, and can even download everything and export it and use it for some reporting. So I think that's great. Then in addition, for the people specifically, it's interesting that they can see in the employee dashboard, they can see how many shares and how many pesos they have and what that actual value is of them. So you can see how it's actually vested as well. And this kind of helps everyone at least to have it a bit more tangible, to also see, oh, well, there's actual value behind that. So I think that really helps. And then probably the most crucial piece of it, which is where everything starts, is the ownership structure. So when you go into the cap table, you can see all the shareholders, and just, I mean, it's a basic thing, but honestly, I mean, before Lecce, we just did it probably like everyone else, just having spreadsheets and printing them, and then it's not really 2020 style. So when the ownership structure gets a bit more complex, I think it's just crucial to have that managed in a proper way. So
Yeah,
I
exactly.
would say these are like probably for me the things that I use most often.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're also, speaking a lot about with your CFO Felix Hupfauf, and I think he, for example, also told us that the fact that in the transactions page out of which this cap table is compiled, you can actually attach all relevant contracts and documents to each
that's
transaction.
also very important. Yeah,
which I think helped during, for example, a due diligence case at a financing round. So
absolutely.
Thank you very much, Roger, for showing us this. In the last couple of minutes, I think we can take a couple of questions. So I'm just gonna open the Q&A panel. Okay, so I have one question, which is, how did introducing Lecce change how you or your employees think about ownership at Frontify?
Good question. I'm not sure if it's, I cannot really tell how much it is because of Lecce, but I think it just visualizes things and makes things just more tangible. But we also invest a lot in, I think it's not only, I mean, a tool helps to manage it properly and show the people how it develops, what the value is, and all these things. That's very important for the people. But in addition to that, you also need to obviously educate them quite often to explain, that that's an actual value you get. How does it work? Proper contracts where you see, is there a cliff, or when does it execute, and all these little thingies. And I think Lecce has quite nice guides about that.
Yeah.
If I'm right. But so yeah, you need to invest a bit of time into that, and Lecce takes a part in it.
Yeah, I actually had the chance recently to speak with one of your employees. It was about another topic, but she told me that she actually checks regularly her dashboard on Lecce.
How everything goes up all
exactly.
the time. Okay, yeah. So that makes sense.
That's yeah. Then a second question here I see, and up to you if you want to disclose that or not. But the question is, your cap table must be very long if many employees are shareholders as well. So do you really have all these employees as shareholders, or did you use an investment vehicle to sort of pool them?
No, we actually really have them in the cap table.
Okay.
So it's not, in my opinion, it's not a really big problem. Again, if you have a tool like Ledger, you can manage that pretty easily. Doesn't really matter. And since it's like all, it would be maybe a different story if it's like all external people, but then there is other complexities. But in a sense of managing it, this kind of works relatively easy. What we do is, if you don't get to a certain minority stake, we have like a representative for the, like smaller stakeholders. So it doesn't really make all the official stuff, more complex. So there is only one representative for, for all the really small stakeholders. So that makes things easier.
Yeah. Thank you. And so we have really a lot of questions today. So I think
that's
we
normally
can take,
a great sign.
It's a great sign. I would say we take one last question. Let me see. So one question is about employee education around the topic of equity plans. And the question is, what is the most important part of employee education on this topic in your eyes?
It's about, in my opinion, it's really about getting people excited about the journey. It's about, first of all, I mean, not only the fact that they know what shares are, how these programs work and so on, but in the end they have to believe in your vision, and they have to understand the journey. I think that's really important. I mean, we're doing, let's say, a classic SaaS growth game. We have VC investors, we have angel investors, so we did that whole game kind of, and that's normally not so easy to understand. So we're very transparent with the people. So we share all of it. We share during the financing round, we shared everything. They are like part of everything. Mm-hmm. And that means that they also can understand how equity develops over time. Because even for me, it was not easy in the beginning to kind of realize, that it can happen that they multiply, in a year, or, the value can be realized, or that's actually real. It's not like just fake, or just potential or something. I mean, there is a lot of potential in the calculation, but people have to understand how much of it is actually realistic and is actually pretty safe, mm-hmm. and how much of it is more like a vision and a potential blue sky scenario. And if they understand these pieces correctly, they can also, for them, understand how much is it worth for me to have shares? How much is it worth for me to mm-hmm. own pesos? It's not just a thing that I get like on top, but I don't care. At some point, then they realize, oh, well, that's proper money, mm-hmm. It's not like just something, and that actually has an upside. Yeah. So I think it's really taking everyone on this journey so they understand, what does it mean to have a VC invest? What does it mean to return at some point? What are the expectations? What is maybe a realistic scenario and a more blue sky scenario? So yes. I would say that's, for me, key.
No, that's super interesting. So it's really about giving people context about, yes, exactly, where the shares and the ownership is in. Great, thank you so much. We will stop the question and answer at this point, but I'm sure, where can people find you, Roger, if they have more questions on that topic? Are you active on Twitter or
yeah,
so?
Sure. Every social channel works, but you can also just Perfect. Write me an email to roger@frontify.com. I'm happy to answer all the questions. I think, when I started, I was super happy that some people were able to help me out. And, I think we've learned quite a few things along the way. And if you have any questions, just drop them. I try to answer all of them quickly.
Great. Thank you. So with this, thank you so much, Roger, for taking the time for this webinar. And maybe could you share one last thing about 2020, what can we look forward to at from Frontify?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on. We know we're working on a rebrand, on a big one. Obviously, we need to, we obviously want to be a best-in-class brand as always. So that's going to come, and we are actually releasing tons of new features, which are great, and going more into the direction of really do proper brand management, not just having a store for your assets, but really, do something that is for everyone. Involve everyone in your brand, make everyone part of building a brand. And we release a few things into that direction in this year.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah, it'll be great.
So thank you, everyone. We will, as usual, upload this video also to the YouTube channel with a couple of resources about what we talked today. So you can check that out over there, and have a great day.
Thanks for having me, and also have a great day, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Roger. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.